Hey guys, it's Miss Duke. I'm going to be reading to you Chapter 1, Children of the Dust Bowl. Guys, this is a great book. Please follow along as I read it to you. 1. Mean Clouds. Life had always been hard on farmers who lived in Oklahoma, and in the 1930s, it was especially hard on those who had lived in the Panhandle, a barren stretch of rock and red soil sandwiched between Texas, Kansas, and New Mexico. These people owned small family farms of 40 to 80 acres and were dry farmers. They had no irrigation system, no reservoirs to store water, no canals to bring water to their farms. When there was enough rain, the Okies in the Panhandle grew wheat and corn and raised cattle. When there wasn't enough rain, they were forced to sell their livestock and farm machinery and borrow money from the bank. Every year they gambled with their lives, hoping for enough rain to get by. In 1931, it stopped raining in the Panhandle. The sky became bright and hot, and it stayed that way every day. Corn stalks in the field shriveled from the sizzling heat. Shoots of wheat dried up and fell to the ground. The farmers were caught in an impossible situation. They were already suffering from the effects of the Great Depression, which had started in 1929 when the stock market collapsed. The Depression caused the price of wheat and corn to fall so low that it made growing these crops unprofitable. Most farmers had borrowed money to buy their land and had borrowed again against their land in lean years. When the prices for their crops fell, many couldn't make payments to the banks that held the title to their land. By 1932, 1,000 families a week in Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas were losing their farms to the banks, and now it had stopped raining in the Panhandle, and the crops themselves were failing. Top of page 4. Then, when it seems that things couldn't get any worse, they did. The year was 1936. It hadn't rained more than just a few drops in the Panhandle for 5 straight years. One day the wind started to blow, and every day it blew harder and harder, as if nature were playing a cruel joke on the Okies. The wind blew the dry soil into the air, and every morning the sun rose only to disappear behind a sky of red dirt and dust. The wind knocked open doors, shattered windows, and leveled barns. It became known as the Great Dust Bowl, and it was centered in the Panhandle near Goodwell, Oklahoma. For there, it had stretched to the western half of Kansas and the eastern half of Colorado, the northeastern portion of New Mexico, and northern Texas. In these areas, and especially in the Panhandle, the dry winds howled for 4 long years, from 1936 to 1940. Frequently, the wind blew more than 50 miles an hour, carrying away the topsoil and leaving only hard red clay, which made farming impossible. Top of page 6. In the flatlands of the Panhandle, people could see the dust storms coming from 20 to 30 miles away. The winds made the sky bull red, blood red, Horace Ray Conley of Floss, Oklahoma. You could see the Northerners coming, he recalled. It carried the old red dirt, and the whole sky would be red. They were mean clouds, ugly clouds. As a child, Horace walked to school backwards to keep the dirt from scraping him in the face. He remembered he was often let out of school to go to the family storm cellar where he would be safe. As the clouds rose and rolled each day, thousands of birds and rabbits raced in front of the approaching storm. That was the signal to the Okies to hurry before it was too late. They had to herd their cows into the barn quickly, tie down farm equipment and whatever supplies they had outside, then run for cover. Cracks around windows and doors were taped or stuffed with wet towels, but it was impossible to escape the dust. At night, families slept with wet cloths or sponges over their face to filter out the dust. But in the morning, they would find their pillows and blankets caked with dirt, their tongues and teeth coated with grit. Every morning, the house had to be clean. Everett Buckland of Waukesha said, if you didn't want to sleep the dust out right quick between the storm, you'd end up scooping it out with a shovel. And every morning, someone had to go check the animals. The fierce gales buried chickens, pigs, dogs, and occasionally cattle. Children were assigned to the task of cleaning the nostrils of cows 2 or 3 times a day. Top of page 8. The storms also created a charge of free-flowing static electricity in the air. If you touched anything metal, a frying pan, a pump handle, a doorknob, you could get a jolting shock. Some old-timers even say the static power electrocuted dozens of jackrabbits. The Dust Bowl killed people who stayed out too long without shelter. Ronald Homey of Hoker almost lost his grandmother to one storm. I remember my grandmother hanging on to the fence post, he said. The wind was blowing so hard she looked like a pennant in a breeze. However, more people died from dust pneumonia, when the dust caused severe damage to the lungs. Benzie Zetsia of Goodwell summed it up, the nightmare experienced by dust bowlers, as it came to be called. The dust storm scared us to pieces, Bessie said. It was dark as the middle of night, and it stayed that way all day. Top of page 10. The storms ended any hope of farming in the Panhandle. The Okies planted mulberry trees for windbreakers and plowed furies deep in the ground to help keep the soil in place. But the wind blasted these seeds from the furies and whipped the crops from the earth. To survive, farmers took to hunting jackrabbits, and the Panhandle diet became biscuits, beans, and fried jack. Others took to hunting coyote, not to eat, but to collect bounty offered by the state for each one killed. It was a time of desperation. From 1930 to 1940, the number of farmers and agricultural workers in the Dust Bowl states declined by approximately 400,000. By 1937, the unemployment rate in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Texas had soared to 30%. Most of the Okies had lost their farms or were about to. Nearly 50% of Oklahoma's farms changed hands in bankruptcy court in sales in the 1930s. When farmers could not pay back the bank, a tractor was sent to knock down his farmhouse as a way of forcing him to leave the land. Tractored out, they called it. The Okies were broke, they were without land, and they were hungry. And still the wind blew day and night, scraping all life from the earth. It was little wonder the Okies named the period in their lives the Dirty 30s. Guys, that chapter just shows you just how bad it was for farmers living in these areas during the Great Depression. Low rainfall and strong wind just destroyed their crops. This was hard, not only for the men and women, but their families. The children were given the jobs of going and cleaning the nostrils of the cows 2 and 3 times a day. That wouldn't be too fun, I wouldn't think. And sleeping with a wet cloth or a sponge over your face so that you wouldn't breathe in a whole lot of the dirt. And still, when you wake up, your teeth and your tongue would have grit on it. I can't stand to get one single grit of sand when I go to the beach in my mouth. It bothers me, so I couldn't imagine this. Guys, listen, it was dark. They said even in the mid of day, it was dark, just like the middle of night because of all the dust. Guys, all the unemployment, people losing their homes. And if they couldn't pay for their homes, the bank would send a tractor out and they would knock down their homes. It was called tractored out. What an awful time to live for the Okies during the Dirty 30s. Have a great day.